Welcome to the Supply Chainiacs with Chris Kobus, and I'm Glenn Koepke. Today's topic is around this infamous term called Otif. Those that are in supply chain, especially on the customer-facing side, you know it all too well. But for those that aren't as familiar with it, Otif is really two different metrics that were combined together into one acronym, standing for on time and in full. So on time is how's my service, and does my service of my transportation and order meet the required due date of the customer? The in full component is based on what I ordered, am I getting that full quantity, right? Am I over, am I under, or am I right on it? And so for many CPG and F&B companies in the market, this is a really strong focus for their organizations for two things. One is around service and making sure they're performing well. And second is around cost management. And so Chris, welcome to the conversation. Awesome to see you again. We'd love to hear your take of what is the problem with Otif, right? Why are companies so obsessed with Otif in this market?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. I tend to think about the challenges as it relates to Otif and the concern from really any enterprise or supply chain really across the ecosystem. I think about it in two components, right? One is the customer experience component, right? We're in an age where customer expectations are at their highest, right? Ultimately the receiver of those goods is using that on time and full date, or the expected on time and full date, as a date to plan their marketing campaigns, as a date to plan their cap expenditure productions, as a date to plan the production of some product, right? And I think the challenge today is again, the expectations are at their highest, so receivers of product are going off of that date, and any change that happens to that date affects their impact to ultimately service their customers. So I think that's one component. I think the other component is the cost associated with the shipper, right? The cost associated with the shipper of not meeting those OTIF requirements. We're seeing this a lot today of what in the form of OTIF penalties, and what CPG providers and product-based companies are paying to retailers in the way of OTIF fines, which is anywhere from 3 to 5% of cost of goods sold, and can very easily be a 7 to 8 digit number for these product-based companies. So just some insights from my side. But Glenn, back to you. Well, what are your thoughts in terms of how real-time visibility can help, and examples you've seen?
Yeah, so internally for a lot of companies, it's giving them the proactive notifications, right? So we talked a little bit about it in the labor section, which is how do I get that single version of truth, right? So if I know where my goods are at any given time, or I know where the truck is or where it isn't, frankly, I can proactively notify my customer before the issue occurs to either inform them of a late delivery and accept the repercussions, or potentially reslot a shipment into that original appointment, therefore avoiding a fine. And so that level of prescriptive insights and proactive nature allows for in-time decision making, right? So rather than wait for it's too late, I can now proactively notify my customer. I think it's no different than if we're hiring a contractor and the contractor says, all right, I'll be there at 10 o'clock, right? You take a couple hours off work and 10 o'clock shows up and the contractor doesn't show up, right? Super frustrating for us as an individual. No different than a warehouse operator retail, right? If your appointment's at 10, the expectation is that you're there typically within some buffer. It varies by retailer. Some it's 15 minutes, some it's to the minute, others it's to the hour. But the ultimate expectation is if you're going to be late, you got to tell us, right? And with the market in the US and Europe, it's very fragmented, right? So it's not as easy as just saying, well, have your truck driver show me when they're going to be there, because it's a very fragmented marketplace with the number of transportation companies. One of the other areas is just validating what the retailers are saying, right? I think oftentimes companies have been caught off guard where, because the retailer just takes the fine off their invoice, they have no chance. It's like tax to the government, right? We're not paying tax, they're taking tax, right? No different than retailers with fines. And so if I know that my truck actually sat outside their location and it was because they're at capacity, and then he ultimately was detained by the retailer, that's not an issue that I'm causing, right? That's a controllable issue on the retail operation side. And so that ability to validate truly what's going on and be able to see truck location, down to the foot level at a geofence at a location, it arms our customers and vendors in the industry to have an educated conversation with their end customer. And so the idea is it doesn't become a he said, she said thing, right? It's just how do we get one version of the truth where it's trustworthy? And if you are late, you accept the repercussion. But if you aren't, how do we make sure we clean up those bottlenecks, right? There's so much waste created in our supply chain. And so ultimately, visibility platforms are really driving towards that single pane of glass. So Chris, those are a few examples that real-time visibility platforms help bring value. I'd love to give your take on the operational side of how real-time platforms are impacting Otif.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Appreciate the insights here. I think some of the examples that I've seen in the marketplace, and I'll use two, right? I think the first is one of our major CPG customers here at FourKites is using our visibility platform to get early awareness of exceptions that are ultimately going to incur OTIF fines. And the way their SLAs work with this particular retailer is if they let that retailer know, the day of or the day before, there's going to be a late arrival or arrival that doesn't meet the expected quantity, they're going to incur OTIF fines. So the value for them on how they've operationalized visibility is getting earlier awareness to those late orders or late shipments, and then setting expectations earlier with that particular retail customer. And again, in accordance with their SLA, as long as they're notifying them early, they're not incurring those OTIF penalties, right? The other example that I think of that goes back to your theme of validation is this same company is using our platform as a way to improve their accounts receivable processes, right? So with FourKites, they're able to accurately see when trucks arrived, when they were gated in, when they broke those geofences, right? As a way to not just manage, their accounts receivable processes with the customer, but again, having that source of truth to overall, increase their workforce efficiency and ultimately avoid any of those OTIF fines they would have otherwise faced. So just some examples from my side, but again, Glenn, this has been great. Appreciate all your insights and appreciate the time today. So for everyone, thanks again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Supply Chainiacs. Thank you.
Thank you.